We've got with us Mr. Chris Doyle, who's joined us from London. Mr. Doyle, this is an important and a significant development. This is what Donald Trump is now stating, that the Americans have destroyed the Iranian military infrastructure on the Kharg Island. A lot of the American military generals have been talking about the possibility of taking over the Kharg Island. And here we see the Americans making their first move on the island, where Trump says that the Americans have destroyed the military infrastructure and have not touched the oil infrastructure. What do you make of this move?
Well, I think it had been much talked about. Kharg Island is well northwest of the Strait of Hormuz. It's about 20 square kilometers, but as your correspondent said, it's the crucial bit of infrastructure for the oil industry. I think the fact that he's not destroying the oil infrastructure indicates how he is going to try to persuade a skeptical American public as to how they're going to pay for this war. I think that he is still talking in terms of, using Iranian oil to pay for the war that he is conducting right now. So no doubt the preservation of some of this oil infrastructure is because President Trump wants actually to try to benefit from it whenever this war is at an end. I think he still hopes and believes that he's going to get some sort of total surrender from the Iranian regime. I think that's misguided. The Iranian regime is pretty stubborn, pretty resilient, and is very unlikely to surrender to a foreign power in such circumstances. I don't see this as happening at all. I think this just shows that actually this conflict, this war, is likely to continue for many more weeks, if not longer.
I think that is crucial as to how long this war, of course, continues. Now, Donald Trump earlier in the day also spoke where he said that he believes that the Iranians will surrender soon. In your assessment, what is making Donald Trump say something like this? Is it supported by anything that he sees in the battlefield? Or is it because he had a easy sort of a campaign in Venezuela, capturing the leader there, which probably made him embark on this Iran war that is making him think that there is an easy victory? Is there an easy victory, or is Donald Trump now trapped in a war from which he cannot exit?
Well, I think he may have thought this right at the start in those initial strikes on the 28th of February, which took out the former supreme leader, of course, and much of his family and other Iranian leaders. But if President Trump hasn't realized by now that the Iranian leadership is considerably more resilient than that, is very, very unlikely just to collapse and, surrender to him, then he is even more foolish than many people think he is. No, this leadership is designed to last. I don't think it's going to in any way just sort of collapse and wither away. So the United States has got to do a lot more to persuade them that that is their only course of action. The Iranians are a proud people. They do not wish to be surrendering to a foreign power, and particularly not to a president like Donald Trump, who has spoken about them in such, disdainful terms. I don't buy this at all. At best, we may get to a situation at some point where there is some negotiated outcome and ceasefire between the United States and Iran. I doubt there will be one with Israel.
All right. Now, it is still early days to predict as to what can happen in this war, but the ramifications of what's playing out is clearly evident in the larger Gulf region. The American military bases in the GCC nations have all come under attack. Some of the hotels and even residential apartments have been hit, but the Iranians say the reason why those hotels and residential apartments in these GCC nations have been hit is because the Iranians say there were American and Israeli intelligence and military staff who are stationed there, which is the reason why they've come under attack. In your assessment, what does this do to the GCC region at large? Because the American military bases in these nations were meant to guarantee their security, but by their presence, these Middle Eastern nations have now come under attack. How do you think the Middle Eastern nations will now look at these American military bases in the region?
Well, the GCC states have always prided themselves on being a safe haven, a place where international businessmen can come and set up shop in security. This now has, sadly for them, being completely undermined by this war. And I think a lot of businesses won't be rushing going back to the likes of Dubai. They are now caught in a bind because, on the one hand, if the Iranian regime remains, then it will remain as a potential security threat in the future. So there'll be those who will argue that the United States must now be allowed to finish the job, or else they'll have a mortal enemy. They'll always have this security threat, and they'll never be able to reclaim this idea as a safe haven in the Middle East. But on the other hand, they also know that they're going to have to be neighbors with Iran, and that they should not, therefore, really be wanted to be seen as backing such a war that is clearly seeing such huge destruction across Iran. These states did not seek this war. They attempted diplomacy to try to prevent it, but are now basically going to have to bear a lot of the consequences, be it economic, political, and even possibly environmental.
All right, now, the state of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister there, he'd been talking about a war with Iran for the last many decades. And some say that, he is one of the key drivers that pushed Donald Trump to begin this war with Iran. Now, if the Iranian government does not fall, if there is no regime change per se, what do you think what kind of an impact do you think this has on the state of Israel, which is at this moment the strongest power in the Middle East, but the Iranians sort of blunted a combined attack by the Americans and the Israelis? How does that change the Israeli equation in the region?
Well, I think for Israel, they have slightly different aims and objectives. And if Netanyahu can claim that he, along with the United States, has seriously bludgeoned Iran and reduced it as a threat to Israel and reasserted a very dominant Iranian deterrence, then to some extent he will be able to claim some sort of victory. So it's different to the United States, because I think the Israeli public is far more prepared to back its leadership in carrying this out, to take some of the economic pain that's inevitable in order to do it. So you have a prime minister who largely has the backing of his people, whereas in the United States you've got the opposite. Donald Trump is actually fighting a war that the majority of the American public don't actually support, and many people within his own party, within his own movement, the MAGA movement, do not support. So it's a very different agenda. Donald Trump will have to be far more mindful, for example, of the economic consequences of all this. The fact that he for years has spoken out against these forever wars in the Middle East, these regime change wars, he will be conscious of all that. For Netanyahu, it's a very different agenda. If this war ends up with Iraq in ruins, decimated, militarily compromised, then that can be presented to many others as a success, particularly if he can also claim at the same time that they've further hit nuclear sites, ballistic missile sites as well.
Right now, there are about 460 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium that no one can actually, with any level of certainty, say whereabouts is it in Iran. Some say it is in Isfahan, but we do not know. Now, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was one of those individuals who was against Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon. He had passed a fatwa not once, but twice, saying that a nuclear weapon should not be acquired by the Iranian Islamic Republic because a nuclear weapon is meant for mass destruction. With him now gone after his assassination, do you think the next leadership, Mujtaba Khamenei, will be okay to have Iran become a nuclear power?
Well, according to Iranian experts and those who've examined this for a long time, Mujtaba is more hardline, and he was not as against a nuclear weapons program as his father. So he is perhaps more likely to pursue this line. Now, this, I think, is for a future day and a scenario, because right now the Iranian leadership will be concentrating on surviving this war, on thwarting the American attacks, even potentially now an amphibious invasion. But certainly I think that the chances that an Iranian leadership, whoever's at the top, will decide to pursue a nuclear option in the future is much higher, but also other powers as well. because they will take note that the likes of North Korea has not been attacked simply because it is a significant nuclear power. So I fear that nuclear proliferation is going to be one of the consequences of this very ill-judged conflict.
I think that's an important analogy that you've given. No one messes with North Korea because they do actually have nuclear weapons, while Iran, which has a nuclear program, which it said that it did not want to acquire nuclear weapons, has been repeatedly attacked by the Americans and the Israelis, not once but twice in a span of the last 10 months in the middle of negotiations. Is there a lesson that the Iranian government will take away from this? Is something that we'll have to wait and watch out for. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chris Doyle, for joining us with that perspective there.
Thank you.